and she felt that some portion of her anxiety was lifted from her mind by the mere fact that she had made so firm a mental resolution, that neither danger nor difficulty should deter her from seeking to know the fate of her lover. She retired to rest now with a greater hope, and while she is courting repose, notwithstanding the chance of the discovered images that fancy may present to her in her slumbers, we will take a glance at the parlour below, and see how far Mrs. Oakley is conveying out the pacific intention she had so tacitly expressed, and how the supper is going forward, which, with not the best grace in the world, she is preparing for her husband, who for the first time in his life had begun to assert his rights, and for Big Ben, the beef-eater, whom she as cordially disliked as it was possible for any woman to detest any man. Mrs. Oakley by no means preserved her taciturn demeanour, for after a little while she spoke, saying, "There is nothing tasty in this house. Suppose I run over the way to Wagarji's, and get some of those Epping sausages with the peculiar flavour." "Ah, do," said Mr. Oakley. "They are beautiful, Ben, I can assure you." "Well, I don't know," said Ben the beef-eater. "Sausages are all very well in their way, but you need such a plagued lot of them. For if you only eat them at one at a time, how soon will you get through a dozen or two?" "A dozen or two?" said Mrs. Oakley. "Why, there are only 5 to a pound." "Then," said Ben, making a mental calculation, "then I think, ma'am, you ought not to get more than 9 pounds of them, and that will be a matter of 45 mouthfuls each." "Get 9 pounds of them," said Mr. Oakley, "if they are wanted. I know Ben has an appetite." "Indeed," said Ben, "but I've fell off lately, and don't take to my wittles as I used. You can order, missus, if you please, a gallon of half and half, as you go along. One must have a drain of drink of some sort, and mind you don't be going to any expense on my account, and getting anything but the little snack I have mentioned. For 10 to 1 I shall take supper when I get to the tower. Only human nature is weak, you know, missus, and requires something to be continually a holding of it off." "Certainly," said Mr. Oakley. "Certainly have what you like, Ben. Just say the word before Mrs. Oakley goes out. Is there anything else?" "No, no," said Ben. "Oh dear, no, nothing to speak of, but if you should pass a shop where they sells fat's bacon, about 4 or 5 pounds, cut into rashers, you'll find, missus, will help down the blessed sausages." "Gracious Providence," said Mrs. Oakley. "Who is to cook it?" "Who is to cook it, ma'am? Why, the kitchen fire, I suppose, but mind you, if the man ain't got any sausages, there's a shop where they sells biled beef at the corner, and I shall be quite satisfied if he brings in about 10 or 12 pounds of that. You can make it up into about half a dozen sandwiches." "Go, my dear, go at once," said Mr. Oakley, "and get Ben his supper. I am quite sure he wants it, and be as quick as you can." "Ah," said Ben, when Mrs. Oakley was gone, "I didn't tell you how was sarved last week at Mrs. Sarvy's. You know they are so precious genteel there that they won't speak about their blessed breaths for fear of wearing themselves out, and they sits down in a chair as if it was balanced only on one leg, and a little more one way or t'other would upset them. Then, if they sees a crumb a-laying on the floor, they rings a bell, and a poor half-starved devil of a servant comes and says, 'Did you ring, ma'am?' And then they says, 'Yes, bring a dust shovel and broom. There is a crumb a-laying there.' And then says I, 'Damn you all,' says I, 'bring a scavenger's cart, and a half-dozen birch brooms. There's a cinder just fell out of the fire.' Then in course they get shocked, and looks as blue as possible, and arter that, when they sees as I ain't a-going, one of them says, 'Mr. Benjamin Blummerguts, would you like to take a glass of wine?' 'I should think so,' says I. Then he says he, 'Which would you prefer, red or white?' says he. 'White,' says I. 'Why, you are screwing up your courage to pull out the red.' So out they pull it, and as soon as I get hold of the bottle, I knocked the neck of it off over the top of the fireplace, and then drank it all up. 'Now, damn ye,' says I, 'you thinks as all this is a mighty genteel and fine, but I don't. and consider you to be the blessedest set of humbugs ever I set eyes on. And if you ever catch me here again, I'll be genteel too, and I can't say more than that. Go to the devil, all of you. So out I went, only I met with a little accident in the hall, for they had a sort of lamp hanging there, and, somehow or another, my head went bang into it, and I carried it out round my neck. But when I did get out, I took it off, and shried it slap in at the parlour window. You never heard such a smash in all your life. I dare say they all fainted away for about a week, the blessed humbugs. Well, I should not wonder, said Mr. Oakley. I never go near them, because I don't like their foolish pomposity and pride, which, upon very slender resources, tries to ape what it ain't at all understand. But here is Mrs. Oakley with the sausages, and I hope you will make yourself comfortable, Ben. Comfortable, I believe you. I rather shall. I means it, and no mistake. I have brought £3, said Mrs. Oakley, and told the man to call in a quarter of an hour in case there is more wanted. The devil you have! And the bacon, Mrs. Oakley, the bacon! I couldn't get any. The man had nothing but hams. Law, ma'am, I'd have put up with a ham cut thick and never have said a word about it. I am an angel of a temper, if you did but know it. Hilloa! Look, is that the fellow with the half and half? Yes, here it is. A pot. A what? A pot, to be sure. Well, I never. You are getting genteel, Mrs. Oakley. Then give us a hold of it. Ben took the pot, and emptied it at a draught, and then he gave a tap at the bottom of it with his knuckles to signify he had accomplished that feat, and then he said, I tells you what, ma'am, if you takes me for a baby, it's a great mistake, and anyone would think you did, to see you offering me a pot merely. It's an insult, ma'am. Fiddle-dee-dee, said Mrs. Oakley, it's a much greater insult to drink it all up, and give nobody a drop. Is it? I wants to know how you are to stop it, ma'am, when you gets to your mouth. That's what I asks you. How are you to stop it, ma'am? You didn't want me to spew back again, did you, ma'am? You low, vile wretch! Come, my dear, said Mr. Oakley. You know our cousin Ben don't live among the most refined society, and so you ought to be able to look over a little of his, I may say, I am sure without offence, roughness now and then. Come, there is no harm done, I'm sure. Forget and forgive, say I. That's my maxim, and always has been, and will always be. Well, said the Beefeater, it's a good one to get through the world with, and so there's an end of it. I forgives you, Mother Oakley. You forget? Yes, to be sure, though I am only a Beefeater. I supposes as I may forgive people for all that. Cousin Oakley? Of course, Ben, of course. Come, wife, you know as well as I that Ben has many good qualities, and that take him for all in all, as the men in the play says, we shan't in a hurry look upon his like again. And I'm sure I don't want to look upon his like again, said Mrs. Oakley. I'd rather by a good deal keep him a week than a fortnight. He's enough to breed a famine in the land, that he is. Oh, bless you, no, said Ben. That's amongst your little mistakes, ma'am, I can assure you. By the by, what a blessed long time that fellow is coming with the rest of the beer and the other sausages. Why, what's the matter with you, Cousin Oakley? Hey, old chap, you look out of sorts. I don't feel just the thing, you know, do you know, Ben? Not the thing? Why now you come to mention it, I somehow feel as if all my blessed inside was on a turn and twist. The devil, I don't feel comfortable at all, I don't. And I am getting very ill, gasped Mr. Oakley. And I'm getting iller, said the Beefeater, manufacturing a word for the occasion. Bless my soul, there's something gone wrong in my inside. I know there's murder, there's a go. Oh, Lord, it's a doubling me up, it is. Oh, I feel as if it's my last hour has come, said Mr. Oakley. I'm a dying man. I am. Oh, good gracious, there was a twinge. Mrs. Oakley, with all the coolness in the world, took down her bonnet from behind the parlour door where it hung,